And you're listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96. We are paying tribute to John William Coltrane. And we played some music from Coltrane. And I think we played a little Jimmy Scott. Little Jimmy Scott, today is his birthday. And Coltrane passed away in 1967 on July 17th, 1967. I was in Los Angeles, California at the particular time. We were driving. I was in the car with a brother named Rasulu from Pasadena was driving. I was, I think it was Nubi, a brother by the name of Nubi. I think Nubi might be in the Nation of Islam minister in Phoenix right now. Myself in the back seat, and James Johnson, a.k.a. Rashidi. And it was announced that John Coltrane had passed away. We were listening to KBCA in Los Angeles, and we almost wrecked the automobile. And it was a very, very sad day. And Dr. Horne, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, it's all good.
Is there very many tributes to Train on the radio today? Are there? I know there's going to be a whole bunch of things about Train coming up, or has it passed?
Well, usually WKCR, the station in New York City, WKCR.org, which probably is the best or second best to Diasporic music in terms of trumpeting black sounds, has these sorts of tributes, but they focus on the birthdays more than the expiration day.
Yes, right. Which I think is the way it should be, right? I agree. And before we really get started, what do you think about the whole track and field thing? I think I used to discuss this with you, and a lot of other people had said, many people had written the African American sprinters off in terms of it was over, finish, finito, blah, 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 blah. But there was a sweep in the world championships. And they also, I don't know where this guy Coleman came in, and he was supposedly the fastest man on planet Earth. Well, he was there were 4 finalists. But what do you think about that particular race?
Well, let me make a footnote. In the Wall Street Journal a few days ago, there was a front page story about how sprinters in the United States have to deal with the indignity of strangers coming up to them in parking lots and shopping centers wanting to race them. Now, what the journalist did not say, but what I inferred, was that the sprinters are largely black. And in a certain sense, it reflects this sort of bafflement at the idea that Black Americans could excel in anything. I mean, do you think that was a reasonable inference?
You know, the phone went out briefly, so I didn't hear exactly what you said. I'm sorry.
I said, do you think that was a reasonable inference on my part?
Yeah, I think that they think that we sing, dance, run, jump, but we can't think. Yeah, I think that that is, especially the American Negro. We're supposed to be those of us that were born in the United States. We're supposed to be the idiots of the race, and I think that imperialism has done that in order to justify their enslavement They had to say that in order to justify the enslavement of African people and all people of color.
Yeah, except that this is a twist, because they cannot believe that we can actually be world-class sprinters. I mean, I thought that was conceded to us. And so this is sort of a 21st century update of a racist trope.
Yeah. Okay. Because Walter Rodney pointed out in his book years ago that the African Americans could sing, dance, run, jump, but didn't control anything. And we are, not, before it was, we had lost the whole, Bob became the biggest, the singing, we lost the singing thing. And, we lost the running and jumping thing too, to not just Jamaica, but, the world is caught up with America in terms of people can compete with the United States on every level. I know you agree with that.
Well, that's part of the theme today, which is the decline of U.S. imperialism. And you see that in particular with regard to Mr. Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia and the infamous fist bump with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who Mr. Biden previously had denounced because of MBS's role in the execution and dismemberment in the Saudi consulate in Turkey of Saudi dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi, whose dismembered body parts have yet to be found. And Mr. Biden had promised to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state, but instead he was in Saudi Arabia yesterday on his knees begging. And what's even worse is that nothing will probably come of it, because he wants Saudi Arabia to pump more petroleum so that the price of gasoline at the pump will go down. But I'm not sure, A, if Saudi Arabia has that excess capacity or spare capacity, or B, even if they did, they would be willing to break their de facto alliance with Moscow, because Saudi Arabia and Russia are two of the leading producers of this fossil fuel in the world. And what's interesting now is that in terms of the decline, not only of U.S. imperialism, but perhaps their North Atlantic allies as a whole, I would point you to an article once again in the Wall Street Journal a day or two ago by their columnist Gerald Seib, S-E-I-B, where he sketches a new world order. But interestingly enough, not a new world order that is led by Washington, but one led by Beijing and Moscow. What he suggests is that with Russia basically curbing energy supplies to Western Europe, you already see that in Germany, there has been advice about turning down the lights, about perhaps people showering together to save on energy costs. There is a fear in Germany that the tap will be turned off altogether, which could send the German economy due south. You have similar worries in France. In Italy, you know that the Prime Minister, Mario Draghi, who was a Yankee man, he was educated at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts, he'll probably be out within the next week or so. And there's a strong Moscow lobby in Rome. And pay close attention to this. Put in your search engine Franco, F-R-A-N-C-O-A, scandal, Germany. Just uncovered was an attempt by the German ultra-right to decapitate the leadership of Germany. And they were going to do this so they could blame it on Syrian refugees, of which there are quite a number in Germany, and then incite internal disarray and disorder with the right wing coming to power. Now, this is not unlike what we've seen in Washington, where you know that the latest news from the January 6th committee is that Mr. Trump consciously and intentionally was working with neo-Nazis who were going to storm the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and prevent the counting of the electoral votes, which would allow him to stay as president. A wrinkle that I will add, and I think will be borne out with subsequent evidence, is that a member of his staff, Mr. Trump's staff, Anthony Ornato, O-R-N-A-T-O, was formerly of the Secret Service, the bodyguards of high-level officials. There was a fear that the Secret Service would somehow kidnap the vice president. That would not allow him to count the electoral college votes, which is one of the reasons he would not get in the limousine to leave the Capitol. He was probably aware of this plot, or what might be said an alleged plot. And so this is something straight out of Hollywood. The president is going to arrange for the kidnapping of the vice president by using a former Secret Service agent who's on his staff. And of course, you see that there's a new scandal with the text messages of Secret Service agents on January 5th, 6th, and 7th now missing. But in this internet age, I'm sure there'll be a way, I hope, to recover these messages. But in any case, what I'm trying to suggest in the wider scheme of things is that the North Atlantic countries are in a state of disarray. I haven't even talked about Boris Johnson being forced out of office in London. And this may portend the sort of disintegration of the North Atlantic camp, because what's going to happen is that Russia is going to send its energy east to China and to other Asian countries. Pay close and careful attention to the visit this week to Iran of President Putin, where he will have a meeting on the sideline with President Erdogan of Turkey, who is obviously playing both sides of the fence with regard to his being part of NATO on the one hand, and then cozying up to Putin on the other. And given the fact that part of this meeting of Mr. Biden in Israel and Saudi Arabia was to gin up some sort of conflict with Iran, if they are successful in that harebrained scheme, I could easily see Saudi Arabia being attacked. I could easily see Saudi oil fields being damaged or destroyed. That could lead to a further spike in oil prices. It would not surprise me if they wound up in the double digits in the United States of America, which would cause outrage, particularly in places like Los Angeles, which are heavily automobile dependent. And that is one of the reasons why we may be on the cusp of a major shakeup in the North Atlantic countries. But what's even more sad about it is that what I've just related to you is something that many in the African community in the United States, they're blissfully and blithely unaware of what's going on. I mean, it's really shameful. It's a castigation of the leadership of the intellectual class, and this may portend our ultimate doom.
You are listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96. We're speaking with Dr. Gerald Horne. Before I turn it over to Melinda, in terms, you talked about Germany. What is the status of the African population in Germany? And there is a music coming out of Germany called Burger High Life. How are African people, I guess many of them for Burger High Life is, you know, the High Life came out of primarily Nigeria and Ghana. But do you know anything about how Africans in Germany are doing, and what's the status of this Burger High Life music?
Well, I will say this. There has been a Black German population for centuries now. It's a product of that old saying, we are here because you were there. That is to say, there were German so-called colonies in Tanganyika, now Tanzania, in Cameroon and Togo, etc. There is a remarkable memoir called Destined to Witness by Hans, H-A-N-S, Massaquoi, M-A-S-S-A-Q-U-O-I. It was supposed to be turned into a motion picture. It has not as of yet. He was a Black German who was in Germany in the 1930s and the 1940s. As a matter of fact, there is a picture on the cover of the copy that I read of him as part of the Hitler Youth. And what he makes clear, and this is something to mull over, which is that even though there was very stringent anti-Black racism in Germany, the Germans were more fixated, the Nazis were more fixated on the Jewish population, which allowed a person like Hans Massaquoi to escape relatively unscathed. And of course, he winds up in the United States and becomes the major editor of Ebony magazine in Chicago, of all places. I will also say that I listened to Africa Link on Deutsche Welle, DW, although not regularly, because the hosts are mostly Africans in exile in Germany, in Bonn.
In Bonn, Germany. Well, I listen to it every day.
Yeah, well, the problem I have with Africa Link is that they're very critical of African leaders, which is fine. They're not as critical of imperialism, which of the North Atlantic countries. As a matter of fact, I would say that's a flaw of BBC Focus on Africa. It's a flaw of Voice of America, their Africa News Tonight program, and Nightline Africa. And it's a disturbing trend, I must say. That's a long-winded way of saying that there is a lot of writing and scholarship lately on the Black German population. Audre Lorde, who, as you know, has roots in what is now Grenada, was a Black Barbados, American woman now in the land of the ancestors, who spent a lot of time in Germany some decades ago, and is credited with helping to inspire Black consciousness in Germany, if people want to track that down.
Yeah, Audre Lorde, she had a Bayesian connection too, I believe. Audre Lorde was very, very. They had a nice. There is a film about her, if I'm not mistaken. A pretty good film. I think they showed it up here, and I think I took my son to it, and he was upset because it was shown at the YMCA, and some Black women had put it on, and Malik was upset because he wanted to know where the popcorn was, but that's another story. But you have another question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do we want to move across to Italy, and Draghi is out?
Well, we hope he's out. I mean, I shouldn't say I hope he's out, because actually the replacement might be worse. I mean, what's happening in Italy is the culmination of many noxious trends. You know that during the Cold War, perhaps the most populous and significant communist party outside of the socialist countries was in Italy. And the United States worked overtime to destabilize the Communist Party of Italy. You know that in the 1947 election, where they were expected to prevail, the United States deployed Italian Americans to get in touch with their relatives to make sure that the Communist Party would not come to power. And then there have been many documentaries and fiction movies, which I recommend, about the 1970s assassination of Christian Democrat leader Aldo Moro, M-O-R-O, who was expected to execute the so-called historic compromise and bring the Communist Party of Italy into the government in Rome. He was kidnapped by ultra-leftists, executed. There is evidence to suggest that the United States collaborated with ultra-leftists in this despicable act. And then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you saw a virtual collapse of the Communist Party of Italy. And so now you have these neo-fascists, predictably, and populist elements who may be coming to power. It's unclear. But in terms of the Ukraine crisis, I think what it portends is Italy weakening its support for the government in Kiev, which will have knock-on effects in both France and Germany. These are the top three powers in the European Union. And what's remarkable about this Ukraine crisis in Europe is that the Europeans are obviously fragmented. As noted, the wobbliness is coming from Berlin, Rome, and Paris. The steadfastness is coming from London, Warsaw, and the Baltics, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. And what that means is that the folks who pay the freight, the Germans, the French, and the Italians, they're being dictated to by non-EU members like London, and then paltry EU members like the Baltics and Poland. That's unsustainable. That's one of the reasons why, if you were a betting person, you might begin to wager that this Ukraine escapade is about to come to an end. And I should say in this context that the Financial Times of London has recently reported that of all of these arms that are being flooded into Ukraine in the billions and billions of dollars, that a good deal of it is making its way to the black market. And so if Afghanistan is the template where the United States flooded Afghanistan in the 1980s with Stinger missiles, and then there was a fear that they'd be used to shoot down civilian aircraft, Europe is going to have a problem for years to come dealing with all these weapons that are awash on that continent, which is one of the reasons, it seems to me, why the euro is collapsing like an incompetently made souffle and will plunge below $1 per euro, probably sooner rather than later, which is really going to make imports into Europe more expensive, which will mean that its trade partners, such as the United States of America, may be hit as well. So I think that at the end of the day, when the United States and its NATO allies, including Canada, chose not to wind up NATO after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was the equivalent of leaving a loaded weapon on the kitchen table in a fraternity house with drunken frat brothers. It was bound to end badly because NATO is a loaded weapon. Ask the people of Libya, ask the people of the former Yugoslavia. But the problem now is that NATO and the United States is dealing with a country, Russia, that can go at them toe-to-toe, backed up by China. And so the United States is the equivalent of a mixed martial artist, so-called expert, who's been beating up on paraplegic children in wheelchairs and somehow thinks that that makes them a bad man. Well, they're about to be disabused of that lunatic notion.
You're listening to Diasporic Music with Melinda Francis, Norman Richmond. We're speaking with Dr. Gerald Horne. And could you talk about the status of the Rwanda-Congo war? The Rwanda, I guess, was led by Paul Kagame, and Congo, I think the leader of the Congo now, is it Tshisekedi? Is he still the leader of Congo?
Tshisekedi, absolutely.
What's the status of that war?
On paper, it's no match. Just look at your map. I mean, Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, is as big in territory as Western Europe. It has a population of 80 plus million. Rwanda, a small country, about a fourth of the population of the DRC. But the Congo charges that Rwanda is supporting guerrillas on the Congolese side of the border. The Rwandans are charging that the Congolese are supporting those they would call genocidaires, that is to say, Hutu, so-called Hutu extremists, who come across the border and wreak havoc in Rwanda. So there were talks just a day or two ago, led by the Kenyans, if I'm not mistaken, but the situation does not seem like it'll be ended anytime soon. And since I'm in Africa, let me also elaborate on the passing of late President Dos Santos in Angola. There's a controversy now. His body is still in Spain. His children who are being investigated by the current government in Rwanda, they say they don't want his body to be returned to Angola. The government wants his body to be returned. They plan to build a mausoleum. So I hope that in Barcelona, they're somehow preserving his body, because supposedly the Angolans want to do to his body what the Russians did to Lenin's body. You can go to Red Square and still see a version of Lenin's body, or what the Vietnamese did to Ho Chi Minh's body. You can go to Vietnam and see a version of Ho Chi Minh's body. So we shall see what occurs.
You're listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96. And we wanted to talk about, oh my God, you know, all of the climate situation in I guess it's Italy, Spain, and Portugal, I believe. Isn't that causing? Could you talk about, you know, the political ramifications of this drought?
Well, it's really out of control. I mean, you saw what's the case in England or in the UK right now. Record temperatures, 40 degrees Celsius, believe it or not. I'm sure that means something to you in Canada. And
yes,
in the United States, there in Texas, where I'm speaking to you now, right now it's 97 degrees. It's been between 95 and 100 Fahrenheit for the last week or two. There's a fear that the entire electrical grid will collapse. That could lead to untold suffering and pain, not to mention death. At the same time, the Supreme Court of the United States has made it more difficult to regulate the climate by dint of government agencies. And because of the obstinance of Senator Manchin of West Virginia, the plans of the Biden administration to pass legislation dealing with the climate have just collapsed. At the same time, as we mentioned a moment or two ago, Mr. Biden is speaking out of both sides of his mouth, because on the one hand, he's talking about dealing with the climate. On the other hand, he flies to Saudi Arabia to try to get the Saudis to pump more fossil fuels, which will contribute to global warming. So our small planet is suffering. It's in extremis. It's unfortunate, needless to say, what's going on, because we are on this ship of fools with these idiots at the wheel, and they seem determined and destined to drive the planet over the cliff.
And you're listening to Diasporic Music with Melinda Francis, Norman Richmond on the line with Dr. Horne. This is a final question, Dr. Horne. The other day was an anniversary of, I think, the birth date of a great sister by the name of Ida B. Wells, and, you know, great journalist, freedom fighter. You know, could you talk about the significance of Ida B. Wells? I think she was born in Mississippi. I think it was Hot Springs, Mississippi.
She was born in Mississippi, but made her name in Memphis as a newspaper editor and publisher, printing stories about lynching, and which caused her to flee for her life, winding up in Chicago, where she eventually settled. She toured Europe in particular, raising a havoc about lynching, and that was a significant factor in causing a curbing of that grisly, ghastly practice whereby Black men in particular were hung from trees. On KPFK, Los Angeles Freedom Now, I'm going to be interviewing in the next few weeks a writer who has investigated journalism, who talks about how lynchings were sort of an entertainment for thousands and thousands of Euro-Americans in the pre-radio, pre-television era. They saw it as something that was entertaining. After the body was cut down, the digits would be amputated and then handed out. They're probably still in jars pickled across the South to this very day. So Ida B. Wells is a heroine. And let me also say, in the context of global affairs in which she made her mark, that something else for the North Atlantic countries to think about is that Russia may be moving to bolster its currency by backing it up with both gold and energy, particularly since the North Atlantic countries say they're going to boycott both. Now, the North Atlantic countries, as you know, they have this fiat currency. That is to say, it's backed up not by anything hard or real, but by your trust in the US government, for example. And what that means is that now the United States has trillions of dollars in debt, inflation that's at record highs. We haven't seen that in 40 years. And so that's one more danger that the North Atlantic countries have to consider. Particularly, I think that it sheds light on the recent popularity of cryptocurrencies, although, of course, they've taken a real blow in recent days and weeks, because they're losing value by the second. But really what the North Atlantic countries have to worry about, and this is a bit of advice. I usually don't give out financial advice, but this is a no-brainer. If and when the Chinese decide to issue a digital currency backed up by something real, you would be wise to at least add that digital currency to your investment portfolio, Black Power 95 listeners.
Last question, Dr. Horne. She had Ida B. Wells had a special relationship to Haiti. She took a stand at the World's Fair in, I forgot what year it was. Well, she definitely championed, the whole Haitian question. Could you talk about that?
Well, sure. I mean, Haiti, right now I've come to the conclusion, I think I mentioned this last week, that the Black American leadership could have done a better job, including Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass, with regard to Haiti, with regard to non-Black American issues in general. I mean, because as the NAACP meets as we speak in Atlantic City, New Jersey, I doubt if any international issues will be discussed. And not only will no international issues be discussed, but that is to the detriment of our community.
And I think that's it, sir. So until next week, I guess we will see you in the whirlwind.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
You have anything else to add, Melinda Francis?
No, I hope everyone stays safe and stays well. And yeah,